In 1692, a quiet village in colonial Massachusetts descended into fear. It began with strange behavior, whispered suspicions, and a few frightened accusations. But within months, an entire community would turn against itself. Neighbors accused neighbors, friends testified against friends, and before the panic ended, innocent men and women would hang for crimes they never committed. This was the dark chapter of American history known as the Salem Witch Trials. To understand how such a tragedy could unfold, we must travel back to the small Puritan community of Salem Village, located in what is now the state of Massachusetts. In the late 17th century, life in this colony was harsh and deeply shaped by religion. The settlers were Puritans, a group of Protestants who believed their society must strictly follow the laws and teachings of the Bible. For the people of Salem, the supernatural world was very real. They believed that God and the devil were constantly battling for control over human souls. Misfortune was often interpreted as a sign of spiritual warfare. Illness, crop failure, or sudden tragedy could easily be blamed on dark forces. In such an atmosphere, fear and suspicion were never far away. The crisis began in the winter of 1692. Two young girls, Betty Paris and Abigail Williams, began behaving strangely. They screamed, convulsed, and claimed to feel invisible forces tormenting them. Local doctors could not find a medical explanation. Instead, they reached a terrifying conclusion: the girls might be under the influence of witchcraft. Soon, the girls began naming those they believed responsible. Their accusations fell first on three women: Tituba, an enslaved woman living in the Paris household; Sarah Good, a poor beggar; and Sarah Osborne, a woman who had often challenged the social norms of the community. All three were quickly arrested. Under intense interrogation, Tituba eventually confessed. She described strange rituals, dark spirits, and a secret network of witches working against the colony. Her confession terrified the villagers. If witches truly lived among them, then anyone could be a suspect. The accusations did not stop. As weeks passed, more people were named. Some were neighbors with long-standing grudges, while others were respected members of the community. Fear spread rapidly through Salem and the surrounding villages. Courts were established to investigate the claims, and the accused were brought forward to face questioning. One of the most troubling pieces of evidence used during the trials was something called spectral evidence. This meant that if someone claimed to see a spirit or apparition of a person harming them, the court could treat that vision as proof of guilt. In other words, a dream or vision could condemn someone to death. As panic grew, the number of accusations exploded. By the summer of 1692, the witch trials had reached their most terrifying phase. Dozens of people sat in crowded jails awaiting trial, and families were torn apart as suspicion spread. The court sentenced the first accused to death in June. Soon after, executions began. The condemned were taken to Gallows Hill, just outside the town, where they were hanged before watching crowds. Among the victims were elderly men, mothers, farmers, and church members. Perhaps the most tragic case was that of Giles Corey, an 80-year-old farmer who refused to enter a plea during his trial. Instead of hanging him, authorities used a brutal punishment known as pressing. Heavy stones were placed on his chest in an attempt to force him to speak. For 2 days he endured the torture. His final words were said to be simple and defiant: "More weight." He died without ever confessing. By the autumn of 1692, the tide slowly began to turn. Some members of the colony started questioning the fairness of the trials, and even respected ministers warned that relying on spectral evidence was dangerous. Eventually, the governor of Massachusetts stepped in and ordered the special court to be dissolved.
The remaining prisoners were released and the execution stopped. But by then, the damage had already been done. 19 people had been executed, 1 man had been crushed to death, and many more had suffered imprisonment, ruined reputations, and the loss of their property. In the years that followed, many in Salem came to regret what had happened. Courts later declared the trials unlawful, and the colony issued formal apologies to the families of the victims. Yet the Salem Witch Trials remain one of the most chilling examples of mass hysteria in American history. What began as a few unexplained events quickly spiraled into a wave of fear that destroyed lives and divided a community. Today, the story of Salem stands as a warning. When fear and suspicion replace reason and justice, even the closest communities can turn against themselves, and the consequences can last for generations.